there legal institutions that look after the well-being, that make sure that refugees and internally displaced people don't have their human rights violated?
I think, Udi, it's important to make the distinction between the two caseloads. On the question of refugees, it is the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees that is responsible for their well-being and the securing of their rights. For the internally displaced people, that responsibility is left to individual states to manage. And that unfortunately is managed in what I would call different ways. The United Nations has guiding principles on how to handle IDPs. And you could also say, in terms of a legal framework, that the African Charter on Human and People's Rights is another framework that could be used to guarantee the rights of displaced people. But unfortunately, we find that the displaced are left to their own devices and largely left to the agencies that are supporting whatever humanitarian support is available. And therefore, you don't have specific assistance coming from the state to look at the special interests of the displaced people.
I mentioned in my introduction, I talked about some of the things that happened in these camps, in these refugee camps. We talked about rapes, we talked about murder, we talked about abuse of women and children. What are some of the reports that you have read? Well, beyond reading reports, some of the camps that we have seen mirror very much what you shared in the introduction. But there's an area that is not talked about much, and that is the trauma that the people living in these camps experience. And when we begin to look at post-camp reinstallation and reintegration, there has to be a very strong psychosocial support component of that program. Remember that they are displaced as a result of insecurity, and most times the war is raging around them anyway. Children, men, women, the elderly are traumatized. Their roles have changed. Men are no longer able to fend for their families. Their dignity is taken away. Women have additional burden because beyond taking care of the children and feeding them, you have a lot of illness in these camps. So the women are taking on additional burdens and taking care of the sick. And so you find a very convoluted situation in these camps with people who have so much time but nothing to do with it.